All right. Welcome, everybody. November 4th. This is the Culture Mastery webinar on IceQ. We're going to talk about what is IceQ, why I think you need it, and what potentially could happen if you don't have it. And I chose an imagery for this webinar that has to do with water and floating and sailing and surfing and staying abreast of the waves. So we want you to surf smoothly when doing business outside of your own culture. We want you to avoid shipwreck, and we want you to keep your balance as you stand on that surfboard or even navigate bigger entities, something like this. So IceQ is part of what we define as global mindset, as being ready for global business, being equipped with the necessary skills and um, skills and power, so to say, and capabilities was the word that I was looking for, that will enable you to conduct your business efficiently and successfully across global waters. So why do we need a global mindset? Why is that important? Because without a global mindset, we might hit rough waters and our vessel may look something like this. And you've heard me say this before. It actually says so on the banner of the company. I will pivot my screen here a little bit. This is one of my favorite lines. If you don't get culture, culture will eventually get you. Your ship may be in rough waters. And how do you handle that? What is it that you need in order to be successful across cultures? We call it IceQ, because when you approach different markets, when you enter different harbors, when you arrive with your product, your widget, your service, your idea, or your team that may not be of the same culture, you need to be able to navigate that ship in light of differences on the crew, and you want to be able to throw your anchor and dock your boat in those unfamiliar harbors where you will encounter different behaviors, where you will talk to people, convince people, sell to people, have people serve you as your suppliers that will not speak the same language, that will not behave in the same way that you do. Now, I want to pay attention to the comments in the chat box. I acknowledge every one of you joining in here and telling us where you're from. I would ask you to put your questions on the topic in the Q&A box. So as you navigate through your Zoom panel there is a chat box and there's a Q&A box. So use the chat to talk amongst yourselves. Use the chat to heckle me from abroad. That's all fine and dandy. If you have questions regarding the content that I'm presenting here today, I would invite you to use the Q&A box. That is what I will pay attention to first when we come to Q&A in a little bit. All right, so be aware of these unfamiliar behaviors, because you may have already come across a quote that is well spread in the cross-cultural world about the inability of human beings to see the world as it actually is. We see the world through our lens, through our preconceived ideas of what the world is like or should be ideally like. And riding those waves of different cultures will be a lot harder if we don't have IceQ. So I've been teasing you. What is this IceQ? What is he talking about? Maybe you read the description of the webinar and you already have a basic idea. We'll get to that in a second. So we don't see the world as it is, said Anais Nin. We see the world as we are. What we see may not be exactly what's happening out there. In neurolinguistic programming, we call it the map is not the territory. And that needs a little bit of a paraphrasation. The map of the world that we walk around through life with is our map that we built uniquely in our minds. Whether that map is actually an accurate representation of the territory that we walk through or work through and live through is highly unlikely. So our map of the world is only a representation of reality. And how we create our map is based on our culture and our personality and our surroundings, the influences of behaviors and personality types around us. So that's why we don't necessarily see the world as it is. We see it as we are through our eyes. So what is this ICE-Q? Christian, you've been teasing us. So ICE-Q is what we call the combination of power skills. You see it here on the bottom. IQ plus CQ plus EQ equals ICE-Q. So ICE-Q is right here, right? I'm highlighting it a little bit. So what is IQ? I think most of you have heard that term and should be familiar with IQ. It's your intelligence quotient. It's your subject matter expertise. It's what you know about going through life, that you put one foot in front of the other and that you step into your pants one leg at a time or into your shirt or blouse one arm at a time. So this is your cognitive abilities. CQ is cultural intelligence, and I will take this apart in a little bit, what constitutes cultural intelligence and CQ. And EQ is your emotional intelligence. So not everything in global business is based on culture. A lot of it also has to do with different personality types, and we would be misguided to make everything about culture. There are other factors at play. Hence the new acronym, or new to many of you probably, the acronym ICE-Q, because it's a combination of these, what I call power skills. And what is this equation here? What is this fraction that I'm showing here? So we call it the global growth formula. So if you want to grow globally, you want to have a large ICE-Q factor. That number should be ideally high. The number of business opportunities, the number of chances you get to do business ideally should be high, because if you have no business opportunities, then how many are you going to convert if the number of opportunities is low? And what is the average deal value of one of these opportunities? So how much, it doesn't have to be a monetary value. It could be any type of value that you define for your success, but every opportunity comes with a certain value. You will have your own metric, what that is. It could be dollars, yen, or euros, or it could be something different for you. It doesn't have to be monetary value. However, this is on the top of the equation. So high ICE-Q times a number of business opportunity times the average value of this opportunity divided by how long will it take you to figure this out abroad? How much time will you need to learn what you need to know to conduct this business globally? And how many times will you not succeed? I'm not a huge fan of the word failure, but I use it for illustration purposes here in this equation. Failure is merely a feedback, what does work and what doesn't work. So if you quote unquote fail, you just got feedback that whatever you did was not sufficient, and let's give it a different approach. But in this economic math, your growth, your global growth will depend on how many opportunities can you create, what is their average value, how high is your ICE-Q in doing so, how fast can you learn, and how rarely will you fail. So the lower the failure rate, the lower the shorter the learning period, the higher your growth rate. So if you can increase your ICE-Q and decrease your learning curve and your failure rate, your growth will be smooth sailing, right? You will grow faster, you will grow stronger. That is why ICE-Q is a relevant factor. This is what we, as the Culture Mastery, address with our clients. Clients come to us to A, reduce their failure rate, B, shorten their learning period, and C, they are wanting to increase their ICE-Q. They want to get better at recognizing cultural differences and recognizing personality types, because it is not always easy to recognize that with a limited map of our territory. As I said earlier, the map is merely a limited representation of what's really going on. So there is a green part of the pie chart of the world that we know what's going on. There is this bluish color of what we know we don't know. So we are aware of our blind spots right now. or what we think are our blind spots, when in fact there is a much, much bigger piece of the pie of information that is outside of our conscious awareness. We don't even know that we don't know it yet. And many of our clients, when they come to us, have exactly that experience, that after or during our work, before we even are done with our work, they recognize, wait a second, these were aspects that were not on our radar. We did not address this in our strategy planning. We were not conscious that we need to be paying attention to some of these cultural and personality factors that we are lacking in IceQ. So let's pick the pieces apart. What is cultural intelligence? Cultural intelligence is your ability to recognize how culture affects behaviors, human behaviors, whether it will be in negotiations, whether it be in how you establish contact with your business partners, how you introduce your product, your services, yourself, your team. How do you work through challenges and conflicts? How do you establish trust with each other? How do you network? How do you communicate? And I would go a step further. How do you influence people? How do you lead, inspire, manage people across cultural differences is what will show up in your CQ, in your cultural intelligence. It's been defined as a 4-part intelligence. So CQ, cultural intelligence, begins with CQ drive here in the top left quadrant. That means, how interested are you? How driven are you to adapting to multicultural situations? So once your drive is there, once you're aware that this is relevant to you, that you recognize this as something that will further your interest, then the next step will be top right here, CQ knowledge. How much do you know? How much do you understand about how cultures are similar or different, or what the mix between similarity and differences are? In a third step, you will develop your CQ strategy. So your awareness and your ability to plan for those cross-cultural interactions. So you in theory, you put it on paper, or you put it in your planning, in your business planning. You make it part of your goal setting and your well-formed outcomes in your business. And where the rubber meets the road, the fourth quadrant is CQ actions. How well are you able to adapt? How are you able to implement your strategy into actual action, into adapting, relating, adjusting your work style, your company's work style, your internal corporate culture to intercultural situations? So this is CQ, CQ drive, CQ knowledge, strategy, and action. And it is a continuous circle, because once you've developed an action, once you put the rubber on the road, or your ship, and let it sail out into the ocean, maybe that's the better metaphor in our webinar today, you will continue this process, because as you complete this circle, you will be confronted with a new level of CQ drive, of new learnings, of the next level of business improvement on a global scale. So how do we do this? We use a lot of measurement tools. I'm not saying that assessments are the end all be all to this issue or to this challenge. However, we have found out, despite the limitations of assessment tools, they do give us a great starting point from which we can work through with our clients. Not every client has the same needs. However, we can start with a baseline of establishing what are the metrics that we're using. So we're looking here at a comparison grid from Aaron Meyer's The Culture Map. Some of you may be familiar with the book. If you're not, then I would invite you to dive into it. We do this with our clients regularly. We introduce them to these comparison frameworks, and I always caution people who see this for the first time, or even people who've been part of our industry for a while and look at this and recognize this. I still caution people to not fall into the trap of taking this as the pure measurement of cultural comparison. No country has a uniform culture. Maybe we find nation cultures, political entities that are fairly homogenous in how they show up, how the people in that country show up as cultural individuals. Maybe Japan would come to mind, maybe South Korea to a certain extent. However, as a general rule, I would argue that nation culture comparisons can be quite misleading if not applied and debriefed properly with a competent cultural training individual or team. However, having said that, having recognized or cautioned you on the challenges of nation culture comparisons, they can give us a baseline. They can give us an idea of what are we talking about. Not so much about where the country dots on this grid fall, but more so on what are the measurement tools, measurement units that we're looking at. So this is a communication grid comparison. And you see the horizontal axis is around confrontation, how much a culture is comfortable with confronting and communicating, and how much a culture would prefer to avoid a confrontation in communication. And it is crossed over with how much emotional expressiveness do we use as we communicate. Are we emotionally expressive? Are we outgoing? Do we use a lot of body language and a lot of voice modulation, excitement? Or are we more modest and monotone and emotionally restrained? So these are basically two dimensions, two cultural comparison dimensions overlaid, and then we can plot, in this case, nation cultures against each other, and more interestingly, we can plot individual profiles against each other. So we will, in our CQ work, measure your cultural profile as an individual and as a team, and we'll be able to say, okay, John Doe is in this quadrant and Jane Smith in that. Do we see a big or wide gap? And what does that gap tell us? What do we need to do as a team to reconcile these differences? So this was communication. Here is a leadership grid, the same principle. You see horizontal is how much do we care about status? Are we more egalitarian on the left side, or are we more hierarchical on the right side? And do we lead top down or more consensus driven? So again, you see here country values plotted against each other. This can easily be done with individuals and teams. And I want to be mindful of a question in the Q&A box. Robin Perry asks, on this emotional expressive side, please restate the name of the framework and author. Thank you for that question, Robin. I will tell you again, this is Erin Meyer, and her book is called The Culture Map, and I will turn around and pick it from the bookshelf. So for those of you who haven't read it yet, this is a great start into the topic of cultural comparison. It is one model. It is not I'm covering the author's name here, Erin Meyer, The Culture Map. It is not the one and only comparison model. We also introduce our clients to a few others. One that I particularly am fond of is the Globesmart profile, to which we are an affiliate partner to the people at Globesmart. So our company is authorized to administer this and debrief it and set all this up. So we're basically a licensing partner for Globesmart. It is a cultural comparison instrument that compares cultures along 5 different dimensions, and you see them here on this image. Independent versus interdependent, that is status. That is whether we are group, collective, interdependent, or whether we are individuals. Then the second one is status, as we had before, egalitarianism versus hierarchy. Then how comfortable are we with uncertainty, risk, comfort, or certainty, comfort? How do we communicate directly or indirectly? And the 5th dimension is, do we operate around a task? Is that important for us, or is it more important for us to establish relationships before we can get to work? So there is a lot more debrief to these 5 dimensions. There's a lot more nuance to this, into which we will dig into our in-depth Ice Cube program that I will tell you about in a little bit. So today is our introductory webinar. However, we have a course planned out for you. And if this is already tickling your interest, I would encourage you to have a pen ready or have your mouse ready to click on this, because I will share with you an interesting course we are preparing for you. So we'll dig into this a little more deeper. So you see here, Globesmart profile. So these are some of the cultural comparison tools that we are using. However, I said earlier, not everything is about culture. Culture is not the same as individual personality. And this is where we come into emotional intelligence, right? To understand human behavior. Yes, it is important that we get a good grip on what are the cultural parameters for this behavior that I'm experiencing, or the behavior that I am displaying myself. However, it's not only culture that shapes who we are, it is also our personality. So culture is not the same as personality. We like to use a personality profiling instrument called BANK, or personality code breaker. And like many other personality profiles, BANK works with 4 prototypes of human or personality behavior. You may have heard about Myers-Briggs or DISC or many, or I don't know, what's the other one? But there's a dime a dozen out there, and I'm not making them wrong. I don't pick sides. We decided as a company that BANK serves us best because it is the one personality profiling tool that allows us to predict decision-making behavior. And in business, this is what we consider to be the important aspect. We want to know, how do people decide? How do they say, I want this instead of that? How do they decide this product works for me, or this service will work for me and this doesn't? So decision making in business is basically how you're going to sell. Is your client, or is your team, your colleague, your boss, are they buying your idea? Are they on board with what you're suggesting? How do people make decisions? In the BANK system, we have, as I said, 4 prototypes, personality prototypes. You see blueprint, that's the B. We have action, that's the A. We have nurturing, that's the N. And we have knowledge, that's the K. And in our in-depth course on IceQ, we'll dive deeper into this. So this is a values-based personality system. So I'm going to give you a little peek into this here. So these 4 personality prototypes can be easily recognized by the values that they hold dear. And we will learn in our course how you can recognize how people, or what people value most, and how their behaviors can be indicators as to which personality types, which codes they are. Mind you, none of us here on this call are simply one of these prototypes. We are all a mix of the 4 prototypes. And in the code breaker assessment, we will check out what it is, what your code is. You will get a chance to find out what the numeric values are for these individual 4 elements. And your code is basically your PIN number to your cell phone, or to your debit card, right? Look at it this way. So unless you have the code that you can use to crack a person's personality type, it'll be fairly hard to predict their decision-making behavior, or to influence, inspire, or leading them. So we talked about cultural profile, so there will be an assessment around that. Personality profile, we will have an assessment around that. And those in combination will give us a lot more meat on the bone. It will give us the rudder and the sails and the smooth water and constant winds to succeed on these global waters. Now, I want to check in with you. You've been very attentive, as far as I can tell on my end. So let me hear it either in the chat box or in the Q&A. It's up to you what comes easier for you. What are some of your biggest challenges right now around these topics in global business? What is it? Imagine you're that little kid down there, and you're looking at the stairs and you're not quite sure yet. So Kristen had her hand raised. So let me see if I can find you again. I think it was Kristen Fenwick. So let me give you the mic real quick. Kristen, you had your hand up? Feel free to share your thought or your challenge. Okay, you would have to come off of mute to do so. I gave you permission to speak. Not that you needed it, but I open it. Kristen, you had a question.
I meant to post a question in the Q&A, and I clicked the wrong. I'm sorry, but my question is,
I can't hear you. I hope somebody can hear you. I unfortunately cannot hear you. So, Kristen, I would invite you then type your comment, your question into the chat box. And okay, Suzanne says she can hear, so it may be an issue on my end. So maybe this is a Zoom thing. Beg your pardon for this. Kristen, I'm sorry, the vocal question doesn't come on, doesn't arrive on my end. So would you please share your comment, your challenge, your question in the chat box for everyone to see? That would probably be most effective at this point. And I will continue here with my slides as you type it into your chat box, whatever you have as your biggest challenge. So when you think about this, your challenge, this could be something that you have interpersonally in your organization. This could be something that you've been experiencing with a vendor, with a client, or with a client that you lost, a client that you've been working on and they're still not on board. It could be various things that you're working through right now in regards to crossing the divide between different cultures and different personality types. So again, Kristen, sorry that the voice activation didn't work. So feel free to type it in the chat box, or anyone else who had a comment or a question. The Q&A box, here it is. Kristen says, email communication is a struggle for us. It's hard to read true meaning in written intercultural communication. And I would agree with you, Kristen. This is a tough one. Let me address this real quick live here, Kristen. This is part of what we do with the bank methodology. We look at how people, and also we include NLP, and I'll show you in a little bit in what's included in this 3-hour course that we're putting together. We're looking at human communication, especially in written communication, as you outlined here in your question. We're looking at which verbal and word predicates people are using in order for you to recognize what their personality type might be. It's not mind reading, it is what we call calibration. We look at how people phrase their thoughts, their ideas, their questions, and the word base that they use is often a surefire indicator what their internal processing looks like. So we give you, with this course, we give you a peek into, or an entry level into, deciphering other people's maps of the territory, how they sail these waters, right? So email communication is truly a struggle, not just for you, Kristen. It is a struggle for all of us, I suspect. And yes, that's a sweeping generalization. However, it's been my experience with myself, with our team, with my wife and I, and with my family and our clients, that the written communication is such a limited form of expression, because if I gave you this information that we're just talking about now in a PDF document, I don't know whether you would read it and how you would make meaning of it. Now, at least you can hear me and see me. So I am adding voice and nonverbal cues to my communication and make it a little bit richer. Now, making sure that nobody's calling us. Thank you very much. I hope this answered your question, Kristen. I will follow up with you later on, and we'll give you some more pointers around how we can work through email communication issues. There's a way to resolve this, and IceQ is exactly the toolbox you want to have. All right, so yes, I see you, Kristen. Excellent. So we can consider this as done. Excellent. Now, Anne Mahoney says, global education, how to get the campus to see the necessity of IceQ. So this sounds like, and there is a challenge in getting decision makers on the campus or in your educational institution, getting them on board with the power of IceQ and what it could do for your organization. That is a great question. I think inviting them to a a free non-committal session like this could be a start. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and offline after this, and maybe we can set something up for the decision-making group in your organization, just to give them a customized glance at this, and then they can make an educated decision whether this is relevant to them or not. I'd be happy to have that conversation. You will get my contact information at the end of this session, and I will reach out to you anyway with an email after this with a link to the recording to give you an opportunity to continue this conversation offline. So I hope this answers your question for now, Anne. And Magali Lalibert, oh, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm suspecting it's Magali Laliberte. My challenge is that I'm working on the African continent and there is nothing available in literature and training offered by different organizations to prepare to the many different African countries and cultures. I hear your pain, Magali. That is very much true. Much of the intercultural research is heavily biased by a Western research and science approach. This is one of those big blind spots. Remember that pie chart with a big piece of the pie that was orange, the things that we don't even know that we don't know. A lot of the research has been done from a very Western perspective, and often Western looking into Eastern Asian world. We are now beginning to see research being conducted that serves the need to look at the diversity on the African continent. Africa, as we all know, I would suspect we all know, is not a country. It is a continent with many, many, many different cultural types and subcategories. However, the work that we do, how we approach this work is typically with trainers and facilitators and coaches that we have vetted personally who have experience in their respective markets. So if I were to issue a training program that involves Nigeria or maybe another country in Western Africa, be it Ghana, be it Cote d'Ivoire, be it Cameroon, we would use trainers, facilitators who have experience in these cultures, who may actually be from those cultures. So I think this is one of the decision-making points that I would invite everyone to keep in mind as you're vetting your service provider, as you are considering applying cultural training in your organization, applying ICE-Q training and coaching in your organization. Ask your provider, do they have the talent that is qualified to speak on these cultures and these markets? If it's only theory from a book, then it may be a great start. It may not get you to the finish line. I hope this answers your question, Magali. And and thank you for your input. Thank you for your feedback here. I like this form of interaction, even though the voice thing, for whatever reason, didn't work just yet. I'll have to figure this out. So I mentioned this course that we're preparing. So it's called Build Your ICE-Q for Global Success. It is already online on our website. You can use this link here, and I'm going to type it in the chat box to make it easier for you to click on. So it's bit.ly/build_ICE-Q. I believe lowercase, uppercase letters matter in this link, so I'm texting it to you here. Yep, Magali, I see you. You are thanking me for answering the question. That is great. So I'm not sure why this link isn't displaying as a link. Let's try this again. Here it is. So if you click on the link in the chat box, it should open a browser window for all of you, and it should lead you to our website where you can see the course description in more detail. If this is something that you or some of your team members or someone that is not on this webinar that you know would benefit from this, I would be very happy if you could share that with them. If this is for you, then hey, by all means, get on board. We have not set a date yet for this. Because I wanted to wait for the outcome of this webinar, and I may do another webinar like today, a week or two from now, to address a wider pool of people who are interested in this. And I would like for everyone to get a chance to kick the tires on this. Now, what's in this? So we'll do 2 times 90 minutes. So it's going to be a live online business training. It will use this platform. It will use Zoom. It will be interactive. We make sure it's not a webinar. It will be an open meeting where I can actually hear you, and we'll see each other, and we'll talk with each other and work with each other. In the first session, the first 90 minutes, we'll dive deep into CQ, into cultural intelligence and cultural comparison frameworks. In session 2, we'll dive into emotional intelligence, into EQ. You get a cultural assessment where you will get access to Globesmart. So you will have access to the 5-dimension tool that I showed you earlier, and you will have access to it for a full 6 months and the full debrief. And Robin in the chat box says, we are not seeing the link you posted here. Okay, let me post it again. So you rest assured, if you're not seeing the link right now here in the chat box, I'm posting, this is why it's not, now here we are. So now you should be seeing the link. If you're not seeing it right now, if you're unable to click it because you're, I don't know, on the phone, or your device does not allow for that, rest assured you will get an email with the link where you can sign up. Yes, Robin, you got the link, everybody, excellent. And then we have another question in the Q&A box. Kirthi Marutapila. Oh man, I hope my cultural intelligence is not failing me. I apologize if I have trouble pronouncing your name. I understand how important that is to all of our identities. So forgive me, Kirti, if I am not pronouncing your name correctly. I would hope we have a call afterwards where you can teach me how to say it properly. The question is, are there any cultural data available on the Middle Eastern countries? In the Middle East, generally, Asians not entertained as consumer. Okay, great. Yes, there is information on Middle Eastern countries, maybe not all of them. However, we do have data on the Arabic world. It may be a bit broad for the Arabic world. However, we do have a pool of trainers and facilitators that are specialized. We have people for Egypt. We have people for Palestine, or the Mesopotamian region. And we also have trainers for the Arabic Peninsula. So we do have a pool of facilitators that could address the nuances that exist in the Middle East. I hope that answers your question. And Suzanne Scott says there seems to be some sort of delay. I apologize for that. I would hope that the recording will address these issues. And Samira says she, or I guess that's a she, is an interculturalist with Arabic studies. Excellent. I love it. See, we already are making the connections here on this webinar. So let me rephrase this before I allow you to go about your day. Not that you need my permission, but here it is. So focus on CQ is in session 1. Focus on EQ is in session 2. You get access to the Globesmart profile. You will also get access to the personality profile, the bank codebreaker. And we will look at an introduction at neurolinguistic programming, NLP, what I mentioned earlier, how people make their map of the world. Are there any more questions in the chat box that I'm missing? I think I've addressed all of them now. So it's up to you. You have a choice. You can insist on doing business your way, and you see that there's a water with shark fins and there is blood in the water. So that is a red ocean. That is up to you whether you want to swim in a red ocean while insisting on doing it your way, or whether you want to choose the blue water and choose the sailing route of success when working outside your own culture. I would invite you to join us for this webinar. Date to be determined. I will hope that after this session and the next webinar we do around this, we will have this done quickly. We will have a date, ideally before the end of the year. My plan would be to have it towards the end of November. I would invite you to check out the link. Check your emails. You will get a follow-up email from me with a recording. And here is how you can get a hold of me if you're within North America. it may be easier to reach me via phone. We are in the Eastern time zone. You see here 404 area code is for the Atlanta area. You can call me during business hours. You can send me an email to office@. You see the email there as well. Again, there is the link in the chat box for the course. I'm posting it again here, and I will double check whether there is any more questions in the Q&A. I think we answered those all. So if you have no more questions, I would conclude this session by thanking you for your time, by being so interactive and being with us here today. I suspect this was of value to you, and I would be excited to see many of you in the course. Before I let you go, give me a quick indicator how many of you are ready to join us for the 3-hour course in the next couple of weeks. Type it in the chat box, type in "I'm in," or part of it, or thumbs up, however you want to voice your or tell me your commitment to this. Let me know in the chat box now. Tell me that you're in. Tell me that you're part of this. Suzanne, excellent. Suzanne is in. Love it, even though there was some delay. Medina is in. Excellent. Awesome. You guys are amazing. Robin says, thank you all. We'll follow up. Excellent. So I look forward to following up with all of you. This was the webinar, the Culture Mastery webinar on IceQ. Laura says she got booted off for a minute. Okay, Laura, I will address your question in the personal debrief afterwards. Stay tuned for the recording. Thank you, everybody, for staying on. Thank you for being present on this day. And I look forward to working with you soon in the future. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and talk to you soon. See you in the IceQ course very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.